Okay. So the Nakuda that he's now going to elaborate and explain is, he quoted the Pasuk referring to Matan Torah, Kol Doidi, the voice of my beloved is coming, Medalek ala Horim, skipping over the mountains, Mekapetz ala Gvois, jumping over the hills. So explained that there's two kinds of koil, as hinted to in our koil Yaakov, one with the vav, without a vav. With a vav is hamshocha, it's a heard voice, and then there's a voice that is the lo yishtama. And that's the voice, the lo postuk, that never ends. That's the voice of Matan Torah, that's the voice of Hashem's cry to us, and that's the voice of Pnimius Alev, of our cry to Hashem, that has no end. It's behemshech, again, we can see clearly to the previous Maimer, which was only a day and a half earlier, 2 days earlier, about the Shidduch HaMalachim, Shidduch HaNeshomas. So this is what he's explaining now. This is what he's explaining, and then it will all tie into Etzlo, the 2 levels of Torah. Torah as it is, Etzlo, with not these 3 levels, and Torah as it is, Shashui b'nei Adam, the delight of man. So this is all in the process of explaining that. But now he is explaining the 2 inyonim of medalig and mekapetz, skipping and jumping. He pointed out already the difference is medalig is with 1 leg, jumping is with 2, skipping is with 1, and hence when you skip, the body, the legs move, but the body remains overall on the same level. But when you jump, the whole body's lifted. So to explain all of that, Baruchnius. So bir achiluk ben shnei inyonim de medalig mekapetz, to explain the difference between these 2 things, medalig mekapetz, in brackets, afshe shneihem, even though both of them are beyond the ishtalshelus, over the mountains, over the hills, skipping, jumping. In other words, neither are orderly, as in walking, measured steps, but there's still a distinction between the 2. So in the transcendent, there are 2 general levels, makif hakorev, makif harochik. There's a makif which is near to pnimius. Pnimius means internalized consciousness, and there's makif harochik, a makif which is distant from internalization. In general, Chassidus, I don't think he brings it here, but Chassidus, the analogy, the physical analogy, one of them is clothing and a home or a house. So clothing surround the person, but they're korev, they're tailored to the person ultimately, even though they're something he wears outside of him. And then there's the house, which is not measured at all by the height of the people that live in it. It's an essential building, a state. So it's a makif harochik, and it embraces all of the inhabitants equally. Maybe he will bring this later, he doesn't, but I'm just mentioning that. It could be, he doesn't mean it quite that way, but that's in general the mashal. However, he brings here mishalim within the nefesh itself. So first he states, Makiv hakorev haynushi yeshli shayches ala pnimi, the near or the close transcendent means a connection to the pnimi. Pnimi means the internalized structure. The gamshu makif, even though it's transcendent, it's beyond. But the fact that it's called beyond implies actually beyond what? So there's already a relationship to that which is beyond. The very word beyond, or makif, surrounding something. So it's a shayches to that something. So it has a shayches to the pnimi. And you'll illustrate this benefesh adam. You say to him, it's moreover, it's not there's a shayches between the makif and the pnimi, but behelim, in a latent, concealed way, the pnimi exists within the makif. It just emerges. Then when the pnimi is then drawn out or expressed, so the makif level is shomer olav, remains hovering, as it were, protecting. By protecting, we mean its function is to see to it that the pnimi does not take the makif in the wrong direction, that the pnimi remains faithful to the core makif of which it is the transcendent of which it is a conscious expression. It'll be much clearer, of course, in the Mesholim he's going to give within the Nefesh. But the distant makif is not measured at all by the Pnimi and a Shaykhal Pnimi cloud. The Pnimi exists within it, like exists within a home, to use our marshal, but it is not the home in no ways. In the drawing plans of the home is how tall are the people for the building. So Abira and Yon the Benefesh Adam. So what is this Benefesh Adam? In the Omer Azal, the Medrash says Chamisha Shemis Nikl. The Neshama has 5 names. Nefesh Ruach Neshama Chai Yichid. The difference is that Nefesh Ruach Neshama is one grouping in Pnimiyah. They are the conscious levels of the Nefesh. In general, Nefesh is behavior. Ruach are the Midas. Neshama is Seichel. So the Chai and Yichid, Makifim, they transcend. Ella, Shechida Makif Arochik. Yichida is. Oh, I forgot to do the good morning, Sid. Or just, I don't know if you. Okay. Yechida, we're in the middle of his Gimel, or third way down. Yechida, no, quarter way down. Yechida makif arochik. So Yechida is a makif which is distant, fundamentally, essentially, from the truth is that the protein, the details do come from it. But the point is, it's makif arochik in the sense that it doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be this oifer. It could be another oifer. It could be another way. Etzem can express itself in endless ways. To use the bigger picture. Mashenkin, another what I'm saying is, another parallel to this is protim, klal, and prat, and etzem. Which we speak about often. Right? Everything has these 3 dimensions. The details of its manifested state, the all-encompassing transcendent identity, and then its essence. And this is all; these terms are all relative. They're all relative. The ultimate essence is only Atzmo, so it's all a relative term. So just to quickly illustrate it in the example of the apple, because that was the example that when we first learned about Etzim and his pashtus and klal, that was the example that Yossi Chitrik brought. I think he was actually quoting Rabbi. So there's the details of the apple, its color, its weight, its taste, etc. Then there's the klal, the type of apple, and the essence that it's an apple. So we see here, this is a good example. The klal is going to, a Macintosh apple is going to have these properties. So when you say Macintosh apple, it's not bound to any one particular property, but it transcends the specific detail. However, the klal is machayiv. What's in seichel? If you have a principle, if you have a formula is machayiv. I'm sorry. We'll just mute you guys and unmute yourselves accordingly. So you have, good morning, Ephraim. You have a principle in a formula, an idea. So it's machayiv, certain protein, but itself transcends the protein. And then there's the etzlo of the apple. The etzlo of the apple doesn't have to manifest in any kind of cloud. It could be any. You say, I say apple to you, you have no idea what kind. If I say to you Macintosh apple, so already you can deduce protein that it's bound to have. Not exactly how taste, the protein should be protein lav dafka till you experience it, but you'll know it's going to have these properties. If I say apple, it could be anything. Of course, it's relative to the world of apple, but as you get deep and deep in etzem, using a scientific example, I tell you, I have an atom in my hand, or there's an atom out there. No idea. Atom, gas, solid, liquid. There's endless things that it could be. If I give you the klal, so you'll have a greater appreciation. Okay, so that's rochik and kodev. The makif harochik is, of course, it's the essence of it. Everything's made of atoms. But it's rochik, it's completely removed from the particular construct, the particular, whatever the term in science is, the pattern, the structure, the molecular, what's the word? The molecular word. Everything has a molecular pattern, gas, solid, liquid, etc., etc. Now, the emphasis of the atom is not a good example either, because it's not the essence either. Now we know the subatomic level; it's a whole dynamic, complex world. Quantum physics. Etzem is mamish pshitus. The atom is a real thing. You can split it, you can divide it. It's a relative essence. It is the essence of all matter, but it's a relative essence. Even deeper is, I'm not a scientist, not a quantum physicist, not a pretend to be. I'm just quoting somebody else's quoting, somebody else's quoting. But the idea is, as I understand, the contemporary science is saying that the core essence, it's mamish, a force, or almost in your ruchni, that defies any kind of construct. Because an atom can exist in isolation. Well, you actually can isolate it. You can. But Koponim, it still has its gdorim. What's behind the core of existence is just pure. So that's etzem within existence, and a pure etzem. The ultimate etzem is only the Eibishter. It's all relative terms. So we're talking about Ichida. So back to the Maimon. So Yechid is Makiv HaRochik, V'chaya, Makiv HaKodev, V'chaya is a Makiv which is near. Again, use that example, the klal, the type. The Makiv of Chaya is felt, its presence is felt in the Koiches Primi. Use the example again of the apple again. The kind of apple, has its signature on every detail of the apple. But example it gives now is an interesting one. Commissioner Kosak about Daniel says about Daniel. So the famous nevuah that Daniel has, and the Malach reveals himself to him and starts to tell him what's going to happen at the end of days. So the pasuk says, Daniel is speaking, I myself saw the vision. The people with me didn't see the image. But a great tremble, fear fell upon them. The Gemara asks, famous Gemara, so it brings it, Megillah, if they didn't see it, the people with him, my time, why were they afraid? Why did tremble overcome them? Well, Mashani, the Gemara answer, the famous answer, Afagav deal. They didn't see it consciously, but Mazlayachazi. The deep level of the nefesh did see it. It didn't translate into, what did I see? Into the seichel, into the vision, into the gashmizdika vision and the gashmizdika seichel. But there's a level within that did see it, and it affected them consciously. Not in the primizdika way, just dread. They didn't know why they were feeling this sense of dread. I'm just reminded of this. A friend of mine told me, Eliezer Turgum, I don't think you guys know him. It's in the Shamari days. He lives here in town now. He doesn't come to MTC. His children have come a little bit. He told me that as a student, he was traveling in Germany, traveling in Europe. And he was in a train traveling from one place to another. Maybe it wasn't a train. At any rate, he remembers that he wasn't familiar with the history of what happened where in Nazi Germany. But traveling through a certain location, he inexplicably was overcome with this dread. This is a negative dread and a terrible, terrible feeling. And then the bus of the train continued and it passed. And that's because he found out later this was some killing site, horrible atrocities that happened there. And his nefesh and the makif level felt it. His seichel couldn't translate what he was feeling because it wasn't nimshech and pratim. But his nefesh and his soul felt this terrible place. That's a negative example, the opposite of Daniel's example. So Vahaino, continuing in the Maimon now, by Daniel, it was an internalized experience. He saw it, he saw it, he understood what he was seeing. There's a malach, and malach had a message and communicated. I saw this. But as he says, the people with me did not see it. If they felt the makiv, therefore they were overcome with this dread. And further elaboration, the makif is called mazel. Mazel tov, right, means that we're saying that the makif that is stirred on this day, a deep level of your soul, toiv should be good, should be nimshach lamata. That's a mazel tov means. So makif is called mazel miloshen noizel, dripping down. The noizlim bin alavana. It's a level that is transcendent and not only drips down. So we're saying mazel tov, it should be a Powerful Amshacha. Fishemenu noizel the native lakeches mimazel is a level that drips down. Today's Tanya, yesterday's Tanya. The Rekia that drips down to the neshamas, the Muslim for the neshamas, Niyamakif, Chesed and Gevura. Right? So from there, it noizel, it flows, literally the native and drips, lakeches pnimium to the conscious faculties. So analyzing what happened with Daniel and his colleagues, or rather to them, now let's examine this further. So what happened as a result of this dread is, first of all, a result of feeling, at a makivdik level of feeling what was going on here, this revelation of the Malach was dread. Now, the charod, the trembling, important point coming now, what does it cause? It causes the blood to drain from the person. The person is not in an expansive state then, and he withdraws. He becomes, kivutz means literally compressed, v'helem, concealed. That's what a makiv does. V'hainu, what it does is, when the makiv is revealed, the pratim becomes, what am I looking for, subsumed. When the makiv is revealed, it overwhelms all of the koiches, and they're not manifest. The koich harotzim, which is a koich makiv, is firing, and the true rotzim is the rotzim to survive. We'll soon see a story, Ashgacha Pratis, today's story. Then the conscious faculties are completely bottled. It's not like feel, I understand, akasha ter, it's a feeling. The will overrides it all and just sweeps all of the koiches pnimium along. Overrides any protests. So to explain this further now, we see even in koiches pnimium, we see this is true, that the higher overwhelms when it's, instead of revelation, there's no room for the lower yet. It's got to give way in order for the lower level to emerge. And that's true even within the system, not just a makif, which is by definition unbound by the hardcore system. But even in the system itself, this principle works. The gamba koiches pnimium and l'royim, we see, excuse me. When the higher faculty is in a state of revelation, so the low one's concealed. Classically, they're true friends that are inseparable. Chachma produces bina, but they got to have this space. What's chachma? He sees the idea. When he sees it, as in that is not a state where he's analyzing, which is completely subjective in a whole different world. It's the objective, the truth shines. It's only when that moment, the epiphany moment of where he saw the truth, like a sense. So what's remained after that experience is, the hanocha means the intellectual posit, which is now going to analyze. Hanocha means to place down, literally. Then bina can emerge. What's chachma? Chachma is ein ze beifin shel havana. Chachma is not a grasp. Ki beifin shel hanocha. That's the way it is. It's an objective, like when you see something, you grasp it. What you see comes and illuminates your mind, floods the mind, illuminates the mind. We're talking about chachma. We're talking about an intellectual. That's the way it is, not super rational, but rational. Just makes sense. It just resonates that this is intellectual truth on a very subliminal, kind of essentially intellectual. In other words, it comes from a level in the nefesh, chachma, that just responds to truth, intellectual truth. This makes sense. Now let's analyze why it does, but it sits well intellectually, not an emotional level, not a. It's hanoch. So shayachas kvar seichel, it's already connected to seichel. And then bina can come and take this idea and then begin the process of analysis. But chachma has to first recede. The moment of chachma has got to recede, and the conclusion remains. That's all. Then the process of bina can begin. So we see here, even within Ishtalshalus, that for the lower level to emerge, the upper level must recede. That bina emerges only after the consummation of chachma. But if chachma is going to remain in the state of, I see it, bina behelim, bina is potentially there, but it's going to remain concealed. That's one illustration. The same is also true in a more dramatic, but still part of the system, evolution, intellect, emotion. Emotions are born of intellect. You have to understand and appreciate why this is fearful or lovable. The emotions can only emerge once the process of intellectual appreciation is eclipsed, literally through the narrow passage of the throat, of the neck rather. The physical body mirrors the makeup of the nefesh. So to go from mind to heart, there's a narrow bridge, meaning that the process of intellect has to recede, and then the heart can express itself. So if we're seeing this within Koyach Pnimiyim, Kashem is Gala Koyach Elyon. When the Koyach Elyon is in a state of revelation, as a Koyach Atachna Behelem, the lower faculty cannot emerge, remains latent, concealed. And the Makiv is certainly true when we're speaking about a Makiv which is altogether beyond the realm of the Pnimi in a conscious way. If the Makiv is revealed, certainly then the conscious faculties completely become concealed and absorbed or surrendered to the Koyach Makiv state. Let's go a bit further, like Rotzen, so when the will faculty, willpower is in a state of revelation, as the the same time, he wants to learn. So when he's experiencing, I really want to learn. You can't learn while you have, I want to learn. The mind it can't emerge. It's completely like a candle in the sunlight. It just doesn't contribute anything because of the force that Ratzon has to withdraw. The conclusion must remain. I want to learn, and now he's in the world of intellect. So you have to that means something. When the Ratzon is revealed, the conscious faculties cannot be revealed simultaneously. Like intellect. Moreover, this is the point. What is the Ratzon? The Ratzon is I want to learn. He wants to become wise, which is an incredible koyach, which in the end doesn't bring it here. Like Kusha Lepler, you can see a Lepler who was born with intellectually limited, relatively speaking, by the force of Seichel, he expanded his mind. The story described it by the Frierdiker Rebbe, and became a scholar. He became a formidable scholar. But the actual learning cannot be while that Ratzon is in force. When he was fasting and crying and he wants to learn, he was envious of the young student of the Mittel Rebbe who were saying Chassidus, Barichas, and the Hasboras were so profound, and he couldn't understand them. And as we told this story once, and eventually became a great masculine Chassidus. So but when the Ratzon is revealed, the Seichel can't work there. So, likewise, going back to the story with Daniel and his colleagues, that what happened was Shemazlayir Chozi. So they saw something, but they could not assimilate in Seichel at all. So what was the effect? Just trembling. A great trembling. Because Mazlayu, that's the Lashon of Gemara. The Mazel saw it. That's the Makiv of Chaya. And the result is everything else closes up. So all of the faculties become concealed. And therefore this trembling, what's trembling? As he said before, the blood drains. Nothing's manifesting. in terms of intellect and seichel and the midas, that the blood is drained, is almost and not expressed. Given shachayis, and the life force is carried by the blood, they still a kadam, so when the blood is withdrawn, no faculty, no part of the body can function if the blood is withdrawn. More detail based on Hashem on Monday.